Hello and welcome to Prague Walks, where we take different walks throughout Prague a couple times a week. So if you're looking for a treadmill walking video, I'll be your proxy walker today. And today we're going to be investigating the district in Prague, Czech Republic, of Břevnov. It's got that R in it, which is really difficult for us foreigners to pronounce. Břevnov. It's about 1,000 years old, this district, established in the 10th century in Prague. So it's been around for a few years, seen some things. One of the most popular destinations in this district is the monastery, which was the first building built in this area. We're still kind of near the castle, probably 20-30 minute walk to the castle from here. But the monastery that was here was also well known for something else, which Czech Republic is known for, and that's their beer. And if you're visiting Prague, I would highly recommend going out to the Břevnov monastery and getting some beer there. Don't go to the center and spend all your money going to some beer spa and sitting in a bathtub full of beer. Go to Břevnov. It's a 1,000-year-old monastery, and have a beer out there, the same way the monks did centuries ago. We started today's walk at the tram stop Bateria, Baterie, and we'll be walking to the tram stop Bořislavka. It's about a half-hour walk. Another thing this area is known for is a lot of different Czech poets and novelists who lived here and would also write about this area. Of course, the Břevnov monastery itself has been the subject of interest of various monastic and religious writings as well. And the monks who have lived in or visited the monastery have documented their experiences, reflections, and spiritual insights that they achieved while living here. Among those who would write about Prague would be the poet František Halas. And he's a really important figure in Czech poetry and literature during the 20th century. He was born in 1901 and died in 1949. He was born in Brno, Czechoslovakia, and grew up in a working-class family. And he studied at the University of Brno. Halas began his career as a poet and writer and became prominent in between the two world wars. And he's primarily associated with the avant-garde, sexuality, identity, and the human condition. Let's take a moment and listen to his poem that he wrote called To Prague in 1938. The faint of faith, bone-gnawing time, has been her beauty giver, from wailing fields illuminated ever, those muraled texts of portals and of walls, evermore thus, ye faint of faith, evermore thus. Beyond our river's gates, hard hooves do thunder. Beyond our river's gates, by hooves torn asunder, lies the ground, and the dread revelation's riders, their flag swirls round. Light are the laurel leaves, heavy the fallen snow. I know, I know. Fear not the dark, fear not the dark, a fugue the like of which never played by Sebastian Bach. As we shall here make sound, when the time comes, when the time comes, the bronze horse of St. Wenceslas did last night restless stir, and the prince clasped his weighty lance. Mark the quarrels advance, ye faint of faith, mark the quarrels advance. Halas was associated with the surrealist movement in Czech literature during the 1930s, and his poetry sometimes incorporated surreal and dreamlike elements, which reflected the influence of surrealism on his work. One of Halas's most famous poetry collections was published in 1938, and the collection is notable for its sensuality and exploration of erotic themes. His poems often challenge societal norms and expectations. Halas's frank and provocative approach to themes like sexuality and love caused controversy and censorship during his lifetime, and some of his works were banned by the authorities. After World War II and the rise of the communist regime in Czechoslovakia, Halas faced political pressure and censorship. He wrote less in his later years, and his poetry took on a more introspective and reflective tone. You'll notice in this area there are a lot of these small villas, and every single one of them has a garden in it. And there's some community gardens as well that we'll pass by. But Czech people throughout the years have always been big gardeners. Sometimes because of political reasons, they wanted to be able to have independence and have their own access to food, but also there's kind of a tradition of relaxation and sitting in the garden with a beer and looking at all the flowers. Off in the distance here, we can see a smokestack rising, and that would have been from the Teplarna Veleslavin. Here we can get a little look at some of these gardens. And the smokestack that you see rising up in the distance there, that was basically a heat factory, and they would burn stuff, probably coal, most likely coal, and basically they would distribute heat and hot water to the entire district from this one big plant. And there's some benefits to this in terms of efficiency and these sort of things. However, in this case, the Teplarna Veleslavin was created in 1961, so it's not really that old, certainly not that old in Prague terms. And then it would be decommissioned in the early 90s. But we'll take a look at it. We'll walk by it. Most of the buildings surrounding the area have razor wire and stuff like that to keep people out. But it is a place if you're interested in exploring, urban exploring. It's probably completely unsafe to go into, but it looks pretty nice from the outside. Some dilapidated old buildings. But yeah, in 1994, a natural gas heating plant would replace it, which is located nearby now. And I think it's important to note we aren't in the very, very nice part of Břevnov. We're in kind of the normal part. But there are other parts of this district which are home to some of the largest villas in all of Prague. And it's quite common for the president of Prague to have an address in this district as well. Václav Havel lived here. And probably because it's got this, it feels kind of like a village, and you've got even the rocky sort of features. I'm not sure if you can see many in the video, but there are areas which are really kind of giant boulders and almost parts of the mountain. And so for being as accessible as in Prague, it certainly has a very wild feeling to it and a very old feeling to it with the monastery and these sort of things. So while we're technically in the district, here you can see kind of some of those rocky formations. So while we're technically in the district, you know, you can be aware we're not exactly in the nicest part, because we want to go by that old smokestack in that area. Another famous resident of Břevnov is Jaroslav Seifert, who is also a poet and Nobel laureate in 1984. And he had very humble beginnings as a journalist and poet, and he was heavily influenced by Prague's city streets, people, and the Czech way of life. And he had a real ability to capture beauty in everyday moments. In 1984, he won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and he was kind of surprised about it. His work is often seen as straightforward and accessible, and he focuses on themes like love, nature, freedom. Seifert's life was not without its challenges, and he lived through times of political upheaval in Czechoslovakia, including Nazi occupation and communist rule. But despite these difficulties, he continued to write poetry that resonated with the people. He's since become much more than a poet and more of a cultural icon. He was part of the avant-garde movement in Czech literature during the 1920s and 1930s, and his poems celebrated the Czech language and identity, becoming a source of pride for all Czech people. Seifert is often referred to as the poet of love, and his verses explore complexities of love from the sensual to the profound. Let's take a moment and listen to one of Jaroslav Seifert's poems. This is titled Place of Pilgrimage. After a long journey, we awoke in the cathedral's cloisters, where men slept on the bare floor. There were no buses in those days, only trams and the train. And on a pilgrimage, one went on foot. We were awakened by bells. They boomed from square-set towers. Under their clangor trembled not only the church, but the dew on the stalks. as though somewhere quite close above our heads, elephants were trampling on the clouds in a morning dance. A few yards from us, the women were dressing. Thus did I catch a glimpse, for only a second or two, of the nakedness of female bodies as hand-raised skirts above heads. But at that moment, someone clamped his hand upon my mouth, so that I could not even let out my breath, and I groped for the wall. A moment later, all were kneeling before the golden reliquary, hailing each other with their songs. I sang with them, but I was hailing something different. Yes, and 1,000 times. Gripped by first knowledge, the singing quickly bore my head away out of the church. In the Bible, the evangelist Luke writes in his Gospel, chapter 1, verse 26, the following. And the wing. Now I know at that fateful moment women act, to whom an angel has announced nothing. They first shriek with delight, then they sob, and mercilessly dig their nails into man's flesh. And as they close their womb and tense their muscles, a heartened tumult hurls wide words up to their lips. I was beginning to get ready for life and headed wherever the world was most exciting. I will recall the rattle of rosaries at fairground stalls, like rain on a tin roof, and the girls, as they strolled among the stalls, nervously clutching their scarves, liberally cast their sparkling eyes in all directions, and their lips launched on the empty air the flavor of kisses to come. Life is hard, an agonizing flight of migratory birds to regions where you are alone, and whence there's no return. And all that you have left behind, the pain, the sorrows, all your disappointments, seem easier to bear than is this loneliness, where there is no consolation to bring a little comfort to your tear-stained soul. What use to me are those sweet sultanas? Good thing that at the rifle booth I won a bright red paper rose. I kept it a long time, and it smells of carbide. So the area we're walking through now would be mostly all of this abandoned area where the Teplarna was, the heating factory, and all of these outbuildings all around here are also all boarded up, as you can see, and they've got razor wire all around the outside of them. I guess I imagine they're most likely some state-owned buildings or something like that. Otherwise, I imagine there would be a lot of desire to develop things out here, because it's otherwise extremely quiet for Prague. And you've got all these big, beautiful old trees here as well. Haven't seen anybody on this entire walk through this area so far. So this just gives you an idea if you're looking for something far off the beaten path, then you can do this little day hike through Prague, starting at the Bateria tram stop in Prague 6 and walking towards Božíslavka tram stop and metro station as well. Sometimes nice to get out of the center, and I notice on a lot of these websites and stuff like this, they tend to almost all exclusively promote the exact same things. And don't get me wrong, the center of Prague is amazing. If you want to see things like the Charles Bridge, just force yourself to get up really early in the morning before it gets completely taken over by tourists. So we've suddenly popped out of that kind of wooded, overgrown, and dilapidated old area, and we've popped into a whole new neighborhood on the other side. And this area is going to be an area that is still being developed. As you can see, there are some of these apartment blocks which were likely put in the 1960s as they started moving housing farther to the outsides of what was considered Prague at the time. And an interesting thing about that is currently, the most lucrative locations to live in Prague would be in, closer to the center, places like Prague 2, Vinohrady, or Prague 8, Karlín. And these are both very, very centrally located. But only 50 or 60 years ago, people were giving up these apartments in these old buildings, because they were kind of seen as older buildings sometimes, in exchange for these new builds on the outsides of town, which have since really kind of gone down in quality over the years, because you've got the nice brick and mason built buildings in Prague, and they really can't compare to the cheap and quick remedies that the Communist Party had for housing solutions in the 1950s and 1960s. The area where we're heading to now is Bořislavka, and there's a metro station there and a big shopping center. But with everything in much of the world, but as I'm noticing more and more through these walks, you scratch a little bit underneath the surface and get into the history of any area, you're gonna find a lot of really messed up stuff. So if you wanted to go on your nice treadmill virtual walk, you are going on a historical treadmill virtual tour of Prague, so you're going to run into these things. So in my research about this area, I discovered that it was actually the home to a slaughter of German civilians who had given up themselves after the end of World War II. However, this was a time of a lot of confusion and a lot of anger at the former occupiers. So they rounded them up and executed around 40 people in this area here. All Germans. All had surrendered. Gives you a glimpse into the absolute brutality of war and what people are capable of in this world, and what's under the surface of all these nicely pruned bushes and streets, and the story of history that still lives on in all of these areas. And Prague is really a city of the old and the new. And I think they've done kind of an amazing job of bridging the older areas with the newer ones. And one of the most important people within Czech literature who's still brought up today is Božena Němcová, who's a pioneer of Czech literature and often regarded as one of the earliest and most influential Czech writers. And she's really well known for her collection and adaptation of Czech folk tales and fairy tales. And she played a really important role in preserving and popularizing these traditional stories, ensuring they were passed down through generations. Let's look at one of her stories, which is titled The 12 Months. And let's think about these folk tales and fairy tales and how and why they still resonate with all of us still today. So the 12 months. Once upon a time, in a small cottage at the edge of a dense forest, lived a poor widow with her 2 daughters. The elder daughter was proud and spoiled, while the younger one was sweet and gentle. The mother loved them both dearly, but she was ill, and they were very poor. One winter's day, the mother sent the elder daughter to the forest to gather strawberries. Despite the snow and frost, the daughter went without complaining, for she believed that her mother's illness was a result of overwork. In the forest, the elder daughter wandered aimlessly, her hands growing numb with cold. Suddenly, she heard a soft voice. "Please, give me shelter, and I will grant you a wish." The girl looked, but saw no one, thinking it was just the wind. She continued on her way, yet the voice persisted, and finally she noticed a tree stump, inside of which was a tiny old man. The elder daughter was taken aback, but felt pity for the tiny man. She agreed to take him home with her. When she arrived, she hid him under her bed so her sister wouldn't see him. Meanwhile, the mother was growing weaker, and the younger daughter, concerned for her mother's health, decided to venture into the forest in search of strawberries. She was kind-hearted and gentle, and the forest creatures sensed her goodness. As she entered the woods, a soft voice echoed, "Please, give me shelter, and I will grant you a wish." Unlike her sister, the younger daughter was curious and kind-hearted. She found the tiny old man in the tree stump and offered to help him. She carried him home and hid him under her bed beside the first one. The next morning, the younger daughter discovered that her mother's illness had worsened, and she needed strawberries urgently. The 2 little men under her bed heard her concern and decided to help her. The first man whispered to the girl, "Ask for 12 months, each one more beautiful than the last, to bring you the berries you need." The girl followed his advice and made her wish. Instantly, a gust of wind blew through the window and the room filled with snowflakes. Each month appeared, from January to December, with their distinct beauty and warmth. They collected the strawberries the girl needed and returned to their own realms. The younger daughter brought the strawberries to her mother, and the berries miraculously cured her. When the elder daughter learned of this, she grew envious and set out to find the 12 months herself, but her greed and impatience led to a different outcome. So there's a lot of reasons why Czech identity itself is considered important to preserve, and why Czech people themselves feel very close to their identity as well. And it should be understood within the context of the historical and cultural, political factors that helped shape this region of the world. The first of which is probably the Habsburg rule. It's important to know that the Czech lands were part of the Habsburg monarchy, which was a multi-ethnic empire, and the dominant culture there was German. Czechs, along with other Slavic peoples, were a minority within this empire. So the preservation of Czech language and culture became crucial in the face of cultural assimilation under the Habsburg rule. And under this rule, German was promoted as the official language, and Czech language and culture was marginalized. Schools, administration, and even the legal system was all done in German, and this threatened the survival of the Czech language itself. And even so, Czechs had their own rich cultural heritage and a long history of their own literature, art, and music. And when the Czech revival came in the 19th century, it aimed to celebrate and promote this heritage and emphasized the importance of Czech contributions to European culture. And of course, the 19th century was also a period of rising nationalism all across Europe. So people sought to assert their own national identities and autonomy in the face of empires and monarchies. The Czech national revival was part of this broader nationalist movement as well. A lot of prominent Czech intellectuals and writers like Božena Němcová and Karel Mácha played a crucial role in promoting Czech language and culture through their literary works, and they helped to create a sense of pride in Czech identity. The revivalists also worked to establish Czech language schools, theaters, and cultural institutions that aimed to educate the population and raise awareness about Czech history, language, and culture. And this, of course, was also coupled with political activism, which is a cultural revival that also had political dimensions to it. And the Czech nationalists wanted greater autonomy within the Habsburg monarchy and advocated for more self-governments and representation in the administration. This promoted a sense of unity among Czechs and bridged divides between different regions and different dialects within the Czech lands. This unity was essential for the success of the movement. Czech literature, art, and music flourished during this period, creating a distinct cultural identity. Works like The Bartered Bride by Smetana and Mai by Karel Hynek Mácha became national symbols. And the revivalists collected and preserved Czech folklore, including folk tales, songs, and traditions. So, the revival of the Czech identity during the 19th century was a response to the cultural suppression and a desire for self-determination and a recognition of the value of Czech language and heritage. It laid the foundation for the modern Czech nation and played a vital role in shaping the country's cultural and political landscape for many years to come. So we're here at the Božíslavka tram stop now. It's the end of our walk. I got some water. Thanks for walking along with me and investigating this area and hopefully learning a little bit more about Czech history and this strange city of Prague. If you're into this sort of thing, please make sure to like and subscribe so we can help grow the channel. I feel like I'm taking a bit of a different approach than a lot of the other city walk videos, where I also try to dig a little bit deeper into the history of these different areas that I wander through. And today, this walk was pretty much a freestyle. And I go back and watch the footage, and I see things that I want to investigate more, and I try to dig into those a little bit. But I like doing them, and I like learning about this area as well. So thanks for coming along with me. Until next time, happy walking.